The Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. Most definitely. And it certainly was an interesting time in the British National Party, wasn't it? In 2008, when the membership list was leaked. Obviously, there'd been an attempt to do it the previous year by disaffected members of the BNP. All of them in protest against the autocratic style of Nick Griffin, who himself, quite frankly, was just a very poor manager of men and women, quite frankly. And it was his totally selfish style of leadership that caused nearly all of these problems, in actual fact. Of course, there were ego issues at play as well behind the scenes, but ultimately it was Griffin's own ego that was the problem. And so, why and how did the BNP membership list get leaked? I think the reason why is pretty obvious, isn't it? It was simply an act of malice. And the simple truth is, anyone involved in that can never claim to be genuinely motivated in the interests of the British National Party. And of course, Matt Single was convicted of that at Nottingham Magistrates Court and received a pitiful fine and a small sum of money in costs and a non-custodial sentence, which quite frankly it really was outrageous compared to the damage that it actually done. And it put obviously a number of people in fear for their safety and their jobs, which was the whole purpose behind it. So we can totally eliminate Sadie Graham and Matt Single in the context from Nationalism. Now, the people who claim that, Kenny Smith was involved in it, well, Kenny was only involved in the injunction previously, in which he was named in the injunction as one of the people who were to be prohibited from actually leaking the membership list. He himself wasn't actually involved in the leak when it happened. That was Matt Single and Sadie Graham, although the case against Sadie Graham was dropped, as we all know. Apparently they're still living in Hailsham in East Sussex now, in actual fact, which is a charming place. I used to live very close to there not long ago. Well, about 3 years ago, in actual fact. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting that they escaped rural Nottinghamshire and went to somewhere like Hailsham. Very odd choice, but hey, each to their own. And so, really, the question is, why did it get leaked? Why did the BNP membership get leaked? How? Well, we know how. It was traced back to the computer through the blog. But the how is the real issue, because I was in contact with Nick Griffin for quite some time, in actual fact, after I left the BNP, and also other members of the BNP. And there was a moment for about several weeks prior to the membership list leak when I actually was advising Griffin and some of his security team on how to secure the BNP membership list and also financial files, but primarily the membership list. And so I advised him to use a system called IronKey, which was interconnected, which meant that no one person could actually unlock the file alone, that they had to have someone basically to unlock it with them. A little bit like having a joint bank account. You need 2 signatures. It's the same sort of system, in actual fact. That would have stopped Matt Single and Sadie Graham from leaking the list. But of course, the damage had already been done. And the answer I got back from them was that, well, the system that you're talking about is simply too complex and too complicated. It wasn't, in actual fact. It was fairly simple to use. And I said to them, well, if you're not going to do that, then at least use the biometrically encrypted USB devices that I use. They wouldn't do that either. And I said, well, okay, well then, if that's not good enough, use the LACI biometric external hard drive. And the great thing about that device, I used to have one in actual fact, is that it looks just like an ordinary external hard drive. And to get at the actual disk itself, you thought, well, okay, so we'll take the back off. So it's very deceptive. The rubber seal on the back looks like something you can just pull off. So you pull it off and it shatters the entire disk drive itself, making it unrecoverable. Perfectly within the BMP's affordability. I mean, they had millions. Let's put it into a proper context. They had millions at their disposal, raised through donations. It was not that they were financially impoverished. They could have done it quite easily. They chose not to do it for whatever reasons known only to them. Well, to Nick Griffin, quite frankly. I mean, everybody to this day keeps saying it was the BNP membership list that wrecked the party. It did do the BNP an enormous amount of damage. There's no arguing against that fact. But in truth, whilst they're always looking for someone else to blame for their own actions, quite frankly, whose responsibility is it? The book, as it were, always stops with the leadership, doesn't it? Responsibility always lands in the lap of the leadership. And Nick Griffin, I can tell you for a fact, knew of other ways to secure the BNP membership list. He didn't take any of those methods seriously. They continued to use this antiquated, outdated system whereby they collected data and then just uploaded it into the central membership list, practically unprotected. There's no point just putting a simple password on an electronic file because you can crack that with brute force anyway. Brute force software, widely available. You can get some nerd of a hacker basically to do the job. But it's totally different with the iron key system and also the lacy hard drive and also the USB biometric devices that I used to use. In fact, I had about a dozen of them at the time. And they wouldn't even invest in them. Because they said, oh, it's complex, expecting this person to contact that person and then hook up, etc. Well, it wasn't, because I actually advised them how to do it. I said, what you do is you keep the main list secure at all times, and as new data comes in each month, you do it on a monthly basis, you keep that in a floating register, quite frankly, separate from the actual membership list. And then once a month, the two people responsible for it, or three, whatever, meet up, and they all enter their security details, and the central list itself gets updated. No problem at all, in actual fact. In fact, Griffin could have had the central list himself, couldn't he? With a single password unlock. But he chose not to do that either, because his management of the party was simply lackluster. He wasn't up to the job, quite frankly. And it's all very well to this day saying, oh, Kenny Smith was to blame for it. Well, Kenny Smith didn't appear in court. He wasn't charged. He wasn't arrested, was he? Perhaps Nick Griffin should have been arrested for willful negligence, quite frankly. Because in my opinion, he was very negligent, And I've kept a record of nearly all of my correspondence with the BNP after I left, and I can tell you for a fact. Because we actually talked about this in the online forum after the fact, when people were still going on about, the leak of the membership list and the damages done, etc. And I told people about the iron key system. And I also told them about, because so many people were paranoid about infiltration, particularly from the far left. I actually told them about very effective, counterintelligence methods that could be introduced to the party. And every time I tried to get adoption, I was told it was too complex for people to understand. Well, okay, fair enough. If it's too complex for people to understand, then there's no point bemoaning the fact that the membership list gets leaked and infiltrators come into the party and carry on a wrecking operation, is there? But ultimately, look at it this way, November 2008, the membership list leaked, major damage, and then Griffin went on Question Time and sent the BNP into a death spiral. In both cases, who was to blame for that? That was Nick Griffin, wasn't it? Obviously. And no one else was to blame for it. But I can assure you, if they had actually taken the security advice seriously that I gave them about iron key and the USB biometric drives and also the lacy system, this simply just would not have happened at all. Because no one like Sadie Graham and Matt Single would have had access to it. I mean, Matt Single apparently was the head of BNP security, which in itself is like, my goodness. It's tragic irony, isn't it? It shows what an absolutely terrible judge of character Nick Griffin was, particularly his own character when looking in the mirror, because even to this day he can't accept responsibility for his own actions, for his own negligence, for his incompetence, quite frankly. And he's always looking for someone else to blame. And conveniently, it's always Farage. Oh, he was very clever, he did this, he did that. No, on the contrary, Griffin handed it to him on a plate. So my advice is this, particularly to the Homeland Party today and other organisations. If you're concerned about your membership list, the integrity of it, then take active measures, active security measures to ensure that it's not leaked by some nasty little worm within the organisation causing such damage as it did to the BNP. Don't be trying smart after the fact, because that's just not good enough. But I can tell you for a fact, yes, the BNP membership list was leaked because of incompetence, quite frankly. It wasn't just malice. Griffin and several other people knew how to secure that membership list and took no active measures to ensure its integrity and the safety and protection of the BNP members. And so therefore, at the end of the day, there really is only one person to blame, isn't there? And that is Nick Griffin, the leader, the failed leader, the destroyer of the British National Party. Okay?